not too long ago, got a new leaf blower. I know, a dramatic change of tone from the incredible time of worship we had, which was wonderful. But I took some time with this leaf blower, and I pulled out the instruction manual, and I did something that's going to shock you. I read the whole thing because I wanted to know how to maintain this thing properly and make sure I understood it so that years could go by and it could still be very valuable and last a long time and be properly maintained. I remember that feeling of getting handed a new baby and you are going, okay, you're missing the instruction manual. I want to be able to maintain this thing for a long time. And I can't believe how much I love this kid, but what do I do? Any other parent ever feel that way, especially if you think back to the beginning? Where is the manual? And there are some great books. There are some great instructions, but a lot of parenting is learning on the job, isn't it? It's on-the-job training, and it's trial and error, unfortunately, more than we would like. And I want to talk for a minute today, especially to dads, but I think no matter where you are in your life, you'll find some application to pull out of this talk specifically to dads. And to say, first of all, that dads, one of the most important jobs, one of the most important responsibilities that we have is to help our kids know God. There's a lot of things we could do, but one of the most important things that we can do is to help our kids and grandkids know God. And before we talk about how to do that specifically, I just want to take a moment and celebrate every dad in the room, whether you're got kids in the house or whether you've got great grandkids at this point in life. Your job is not easy. Way to go. I don't care if anybody else is clapping for you. I am clapping for you today. You are doing a great job. And even if you feel like, man, I didn't do a great job, there's a wake of disaster in my parenting history. There are a lot of things you did great, and it's hard. It's not easy to be a dad, but it's so important. You could look around and go, well, gee, there's a million fathers in the world. Me being a dad is just not that special. Everybody's I know tons of dads. Yeah, ask your kids. Ask your kids if it matters how well you do. And they will lift up that role as being one of the most important things you'll ever do. We know this intuitively, but we also know this statistically. Being a dad, not just existing, everybody has a father in some form or another. But being a present dad, being a dad that cares, being a dad that is engaged and involved is so critical to the health and the life of your kids. I'm going to put up a little chart from a 2024 research that talks about, this is a little small, so I'm going to read it for you if you can't see it. It describes the strength of a father's presence. Children with involved fathers have a strong foundation for well-being. I'm reading the left side first. They are at lower risk for a host of poor childhood outcomes, and here's the ones that they included on this list. Children who have fathers who are actively present in their life have lower infant mortality. They're less risk for low birth weight, emotional and behavioral problems. They're at less risk for neglect and abuse, even from other people outside the family. They're at less risk for injury. They're at less risk for obesity, poor school performance, teen pregnancy, incarceration as juveniles. They're at less risk to abuse alcohol and drugs, less risk for criminal activity and suicide. Putting it like this and listing all these things makes it seem like, oh my goodness, being a dad is a big deal, isn't it? Yes, that's the point. And there are so many things that dads do. Just to think about what I do and friends I have and other dads that I know, there's a laundry list of paying for things, going to work day in and day out to pay for things, to help with the medical issues when kids aren't feeling well, taking them to the doctor, disciplining, guiding, teaching, taking them to and from practice, cooking, helping out with some house chores. I know a lot of dads that do that. Guiding kids and grandkids in relationship issues when they get in trouble, paying for things. There's just a lot of responsibilities that dads do. Day in and day out doesn't seem like a big deal, but we got to remember One of the most important things on the job description, if there was an instruction manual, which actually Scripture gives us some really important instructions, it's helping our kids know God personally. And we do this specifically in two ways that I want to talk about today. It's through our example and through our instruction. Through our example and instruction. Let me make a quick side note. I know there are some who are hearing what I'm saying right now, and you have really tried to do your best to help your kids and grandkids know God, and they don't seem to be walking with Jesus. And if that is the case for you, set aside all guilt. Your job is just to set the example and the instruction. They make the choice. So if you have been carrying that guilt and going, oh my gosh, I want my kids to know God, trust Him. Just trust Him. Let it go. Don't feel guilty. Don't feel like a failure. Continue to set the example. Continue to pray and instruct, and let God do the rest. Okay? Because it's a heavy burden to carry when it's not yours. Here's our passage for the day. One of the most clear, succinct fatherhood passages in Scripture. It comes from Ephesians 6:4. It says this, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way that you treat them." Don't do that. Rather, do this. Bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Can you see that well enough for us to read it together? I'm seeing some heads. Yeah? Let's try it. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way that you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Ephesians 6:4. This is some of where the example comes in, is the first part. Don't set a bad example in the way you treat them. We set examples for kids without even realizing it. Dads, specifically, the way that you live your life is setting a grid for your kids so that they think that is normal. Imagine that. The way that you live your life at each stage is setting a grid for your kids and making neurological impressions in their young minds so that they think that is the way it is. They have norms established by you. So if birthdays, for example, are celebrations and you welcome another year and you're thankful, kids are going to think, well, that's what happens when I get older and have birthdays. And if birthdays for you are like, oh, no, another year, I'm getting older. Kids are going to think, well, that's what we do at birthdays. We mumble under our breath. My dad gave me a gift I didn't realize till decades later. When he turned 40, I still remember when he turned 40 because my parents actually wrote a song. They rewrote the lyrics to a popular song called Turning 40 was the name of the song. And the lyrics that they wrote were, I have 2 loving children that make my life complete. I'm so thankful. I'll treasure these years turning 40. And that whole impression, for me, set the grid of what it means to turn 40. Now, how many of you got that kind of impression about turning 40 when you were a kid? Most people are like, over the hill, black decor, it's all downhill from here. That's not how I approached 40 at all. And I didn't realize this until preparing for this message, that when I came into 40, I came into it running. I'm excited. This is going to be the best decade in my life. I think it had something to do with that song. My parents set the grid. Dads, get up and go to work and talk about how much you hate work. Talk about how much your boss is a horrible person, or, man, I can't wait till I'm done with this. Guess what kids are going to think about work? Well, when I get older and when I have to go to work, what am I going to think about work? Dad set the grid. Aging. Oh, man, aging is the worst. You just, all these pains and aches and all these things that I've got to do and all these terrible things that are happening to my body. If that is the message that we send, guess what our kids are going to pick up? Well, when I get that age, I guess fear, trepidation, and decrepitation are all that But if dads and grandfathers set the example of, there are challenges that I didn't expect. They're harder than I imagined, but God is showing up faithfully every day. And every day I learn to trust Him more, and every day I have more hope, and the hope of heaven gets a little clearer in my eyes. Guess what grid you're setting for your kids about aging? We set the example without even realizing it. Here's the good news. Because if you're feeling like, oh, what kind of examples have I set? The good news is we can choose what examples to set. And we can change what examples to set. Here are three in particular that are so important for us to set a good example with. The first one is by the way that we love God. This is so important because we can talk whatever we want. But people who know us well smell right through it, don't they? That smells like a phony. That smells like a hypocrite. That smells like a parent who's just saying what they feel like they should say, but it wears real thin real quick if it's not for real. I've started thinking in the last few years, I just hope I'm less and less impressive to people. And messages I put a lot into Sunday morning talks. I want to do a good job. But I just want to live it better than I speak it. You know? I don't always do that. But the example goes a long way for dads. The way that you love God. Is it talk or is it real? It doesn't have to be perfect. Gosh, it doesn't have to be perfect. But is it genuine? Because kids will see that. Second example that we can set that's really, really important is by the way we love them. By the way that we treat them. Let's go back to that Ephesians 6:4 passage. Don't provoke your kids to anger by the way that you treat them. Rather, bring them up in the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. Here's a good clue, dads. If your kids are angry, if they're displaying more anger, if the grandkids are displaying, especially in relation to you or the way that you're interacting with them, that's a good trigger to say maybe something needs to change here. Maybe it's not just them. Maybe I don't need to just do more of what I'm doing. Maybe I should reassess here. Hey, what's going on? Tell me what it's like to be you. What's the anger coming from? Don't provoke them to anger by the way that you treat them. Maybe anger's not the right response, but maybe it's not the right parenting that's bringing out that response. It's a wonderful practice when things aren't heated in the family, when things are not tense, not in the moment where you're saying all kinds of things you wish you could take back, but in a quieter moment to come back around and say, hey, I've noticed this and this is happening. What's going on? What can you share with me that I don't already know, that I don't understand? Help me understand. I want to help. Also, not just provoking anger from the kids, but responding in anger to loved ones. I'm going to ask a question that I'm inviting you to raise your hand on, and I want to invite you to be honest, because God knows if you're honest. How many of you have ever responded in anger to a loved one? And then regretted it almost immediately? Golly. You can see the pain in their faces when you bark at them, or we say snippety things, or say the cutting word that you know is the cutting word that's going to really get to them. Man, this is really important to practice Paul's definition of love in 1 Corinthians 13. What's the first descriptor? Love is what? Love is patient. Love is patient. It's not quick to anger. It has a slowed response time so that love can be inserted instead of the anger. It's slowing things down. This was a significant struggle for me for a number of years as a parent, to the point where I was like, gosh, I don't know what to do about this. I'm responding in anger. It's almost a hair trigger. You know what helped? Just letting my Heavenly Father father me. Okay, this is an area I need help in, Lord. Help me. I don't even know what to do. Just help me. And He gave some guidance, and over time, that really helped. Here's a third example that we can set, is how we love their mom. It's important to set an example of how we love our kids and how we love God, but it's really critical that we set a good grid in our kids' lives for how we love their mom. I'm going to say some challenging things in the next few minutes. And some things that you may go, well, that's countercultural. Yeah? Sometimes kingdom culture and social culture don't run in parallel lines. The way that we treat our kids' moms, no matter what age or what the dynamic of the relationship is setting a critical grid of example of what is being impressioned upon our kids. Think of it this way. If you knew you had a daughter that was going to grow up and look for a guy to marry to treat her just the way you treated her mom, would you be okay with that? If my daughter was going to look for somebody to treat her just the way I treated her mom, would I be okay with that? Now, there's a variety of different situations here. So for one example, if you are married to mom, if you are married to your kid's mom, continue to lift that person up and love and respect and do everything you can to keep that marriage strong. Marriage is work. Just being married doesn't mean it's a healthy marriage, but do what you can. Because that example is setting years of faithfulness for your kids year after year. So even if the marriage is old, even if it's getting stale, do what you can to stay healthy in that marriage. Now, there are some who you're living with mom, but not married to mom. And I want to talk a little bit about cohabitation because this has become something that is so common. I hear it so many conversations around me on a day-to-day basis that living together has become totally normal. And I want to share a couple things related to this. For one thing, this is culture's response to a problem. It creates new problems, but it's culture's response to a problem. We grew up in a generation for the last several generations where we saw vows being taken and vows being broken. And hearts along with it being broken and marriages falling apart. And so culture's response is to say, well, we're just not going to take the vows so we don't break the vows. We're going to try this out. We're going to see if we're compatible. We're not going to make big promises till death do us part that we can't keep, right? This has been an attempt to help a problem that has been seen. And I fully understand the attempt. It's just not the right solution. God offers a solution. It's not dissolving or disintegrating or bringing down the vows of marriage. It's actually taking the nuclear center of a family as still a husband and wife and making marriages as healthy as possible. Let's reconstruct. Let's healthify. Let's make this as good as it can be rather than taking away the vows so that there's no sense of hypocrisy or broken of promises. Let's keep the promises. This is a really, really important center of society is a husband and wife holding on to vows and living them out. I know some of us in the room or some of us who are listening online have past experiences of either divorce or broken marriages. And again, I just hope you hear grace and God's love for you to move forward from wherever you've been. This is not a place of condemning anybody. But when we're trying to find solutions for brokenness, we have to find God's solutions, and His solutions are not dissolving the idea of marriage and cohabitating. We know this intuitively that the marriage commitment requires way more than just a half effort or a tangential commitment. It requires two people going into this for the long term that are committed to basing their love from God and for each other for the rest of their life. We would not take this same casual approach in society for parenting. Well, if my kids don't work out, I may only be a parent for 5 or 10 years, but I might walk away from that and cut them off. We would never go, that's an acceptable parenting strategy. And yet, we come into cohabitation relationships culturally with that same kind of commitment expectation. Well, if this doesn't work out, we wouldn't even accept that from a surgeon that we only see like once in a lifetime. Hey, I know this is supposed to be a 6-hour surgery. Here's your pre-op pep talk. It's supposed to be a 6-hour surgery, but if it goes longer and we get in there and there are complications, I've got some appointments, so I will be bailing at around the 6-hour mark. Sorry, you're not my surgeon. I need a commitment to see this through the end of the commitment period. If it takes 10 hours, sew me back up when I'm well. You're going to destroy. We wouldn't accept this on our favorite college sports team. Could you imagine if the cultural assumption for being on a college sports team was if the team isn't playing well If we're losing mid-game, I might walk off the court. That's my commitment level. Just want everybody to understand that. If the season's taking a downturn, we all are free agents here. We're not really committed to being a part of the team. We could walk away. We wouldn't be okay with that. I'm not trying to smash a black and white reality onto a lot of nuances of relationship. But what I am trying to do is reestablish a vision that God has set from the beginning of marriage being a husband and wife loving and committing to one another like Christ loves the church. We can't pull it down to make it less. It's too important. The commitment level is too strong. The hearts that are involved are too precious to God to redesign something else that makes us feel a little bit safer and a little less committed. And I say this very specific to whatever you're going through, if you're in a situation where the marriage is struggling, we don't need judgment from one another. We need help. We need the relationship that can say, hey, I need help. This isn't going well. What can we do to bring it back together? What do we do to heal? What do we do to restore the connections that we have? And if there's been broken relationships in the past, or broken hearts, or lots of fear, or hurt, or hang-ups, or things that are just really holding us back from moving forward with a sense of commitment or new promise or hope, let's work those out. God can bring healing to those past things. And another possible scenario is that kid's mom is, you're not together with kid's mom. That's the case for a lot of people as well. And if that's the case, for whatever reason, if you were together, or it was a very brief relationship, and the kids still have mom time they go to and dad time they go to, that's the case for a lot of people. I just want to encourage you, the way that you respect and lift up mom, even whether or not you like her, dads, the way that you lift up mom is setting a huge example to your kids. Here's a principle that tends to play out true. If we trash talk somebody, the relationship ends up garbage. So even if the relationship was broken and there's lots of hurt, if we trash talk somebody, the relationship usually ends up garbage. Okay, let's switch gears. That was most of the hard things I wanted to say today. Sometimes we get into a habit of always being treated as a customer, where the customer is always right. And God treats us like a father. There are some things in His Word that just aren't winsome. They're challenging. And a father knows, if you've ever parented a kid, you know, sometimes we say a lot of loving, encouraging things. Sometimes we have to say things that guide and correct, and it's not easy to hear. Let's talk a little bit about instruction. The example is one thing, the instruction is another. Fathers, don't provoke your kids to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. What kind of discipline or instruction? I like the word discipline here because it's not actually the same thing as punishment. When we bring kids up in discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord, the idea is we want to give external discipline, external guardrails to help people move in a direction that is good. That's good for them and it honors God. And eventually, hopefully, with parenting, if we had wise parents that gave the right amount of discipline, we'll learn to make that external discipline an internal discipline so that we can choose on our own to do what is good and leads to life and leads to God. That's a different style of parenting than just, here's the rules and I'm coming down to smash you if you miss the rules. And some of us have actually seen God that way. When we parent wisely, we set our kids up for success so that doing what is right is the easiest thing. Doing what is right is the way the system is structured. Doing what is wrong actually is difficult and has inherent unpleasant consequences. This idea of helping kids have discipline is sort of the counterbalance to the idea of don't provoke them to anger. Don't be too harsh. Don't come on too strong, parents. On the other hand, we actually do need to set and establish structure and discipline in a way that guides them. Otherwise, our passivity is going to harm them. There's a zone in the middle that is a healthy discipline. I'm going to read you this quote. An undisciplined life has short-term rewards and long-term resistance. A disciplined life has short-term resistance and long-term rewards. It's not always a popular thing to do, to bring a discipline to a human being that you're in charge of, but it brings long-term rewards. How else do we instruct? Let me just pull back for a minute and say the bulk of instruction comes through our example. So anything that we can do to change ourselves, to set a better example, is worth 2 or 3 times as much in talking about something or teaching about something. Let's bring it home with some encouraging ideas. Dads, grandparents, parents, anyone. What's the instruction look like for your family members that you're in charge of? The instruction is actual teaching. The example is huge. It does most of the teaching, but what does the teaching part look like? The instruction of God and his ways. What does that look like for you? Instead of laying out what I think it should look like, actually, Paul didn't do that in the passage. He just said, make sure you're instructing your kids. That can look like a lot of different ways. Well, what does it look like? I would encourage you, as a influence in your kids or grandkids, pick one thing and just establish this normal habit that involves instruction to your kids or grandkids. It probably should involve the Bible if it's going to be godly biblical instruction, but just find a way to incorporate some sort of teaching into the regular routine. Maybe it's as simple as saying, church is going to be a priority every week for us. That's a great starting point. Let's bring it to people who have thought through this and send my kids to an area where somebody's really prepared a message for them and they'll teach them the Bible. That's a great start. Probably not a great place to stop, but that's a great start. But one thing, I have a friend who his instruction time is every night at bedtime, he'll tuck his kids in, he'll tuck his son in, and they'll do 2 things. He'll ask him a Bible question, like a Bible quiz, and the son will answer if he knows it. Otherwise, he'll talk about it. And he'll also ask him a Rocky question. They love the Rocky movies. So every night of the week is a different quiz question from one of the Rocky movies. What color were Apollo Creed's shorts in Rocky 4? Boom, kid will nail it. And it's a fun time. Just every night, it's a little routine they have. It's a great routine, a ritual of instruction. For us, mine is really simple. You're going to go, that's not hard. I could probably figure that out myself. Ours is really simple. My master plan of spiritual leadership in the house is just I keep a Bible sitting in the middle of the dinner table because I know that's a place we tend to gather every day. And it's already there, so I don't have to go find it. And most nights, probably half or more of the dinner times, the Bible's there, and after we eat, I'll just say, hey, so-and-so, can you read this passage tonight? And so just open the bookmark, and right now we're in Matthew. Read a paragraph, and we'll just take turns reading it. Sometimes it generates discussion. Sometimes it's, okay, let's clean up the dishes. It's a very simple, regular, easy-to-do routine. Because what I've noticed is a lot of dads, like me, feel a little bit overwhelmed when it comes to instructing your kids in the Lord. What? Well, that's a big task. Like, where's the curriculum? Well, it's already here. It's already life. Just being a little bit intentional generates a lot of discussion. And through that discussion with the application of God's word, a lot of wonderful things will happen in the life of the family. So here's my encouragement to you. If you don't yet have one, just pick one little thing that is the instruction part of your life with your kids or grandkids. And if you're a grandparent, you have incredible opportunities to do this that you may not even realize. Pick one little thing. Make it fun. Maybe throw in some Rocky quote quizzes. Do something that brings some life to it. And bring your kids and grandkids up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord with just a hint of intentionality, and I think God will use that to go a long way. I'd encourage you to think of that one thing, and even on your way home, if you could crystallize it, if you don't yet have that, just crystallize one thing. Here's my application. Here's what going away. I want to bring a little bit of instruction to this relationship that involves God's word, and I want to learn from it too. Can we stand together? I would like to close. I would like to close with an encouraging word for all parents. if you have charge over kids and grandkids, God has given you an incredible gift and a blessing. What a blessing. I know we don't do it perfectly. I know we don't do it 100% of the time, just like God would want us. But we've got a new opportunity every single day to love and to represent him. One of the best responsibilities you have is to help your kids know God personally. May he give you all the strength, wisdom, and encouragement you need as you follow him. You are sent.